Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today, I'll continue bringing you the heartfelt story of the single mother, Lythieuca, and police officer Hoai. As you already know, in the previous episode, thanks to a major achievement in an important case, Hoai was specially granted leave by his superiors. The moment he returned home, their little house lit up with laughter and the warmth of family. Hoai was overwhelmed with emotion, while little Tony clung tightly to his father, unwilling to let him go for even a second. Those brief yet precious moments of reunion made everyone feel as if peace had finally returned to their lives. But happiness often doesn't last long. Hoai was given only 2 short days off. Today, he must pack his bag once again, preparing to head back to his unit over 130 kilometers away to continue his duties. Hoai bit her lip to hold back tears, while Tony grabbed his father's hand and innocently asked, "Daddy, are you leaving again?" A question that pierced Hoai's heart. In the middle of this emotional farewell, an unexpected accident occurred. Tony fell, hitting his head hard on the ground, and started bleeding. Hoai panicked, crying as she held her son, while Hoai frantically carried him straight to the hospital. His heart felt like it was about to explode, fear for his son's safety mixed with the heavy burden of knowing he was about to leave his small family behind. Now, Hoai faces a painful dilemma. Should he set aside his duty to stay and care for Tony and Hoai in this time of crisis? Or must he grit his teeth and return to his post, leaving behind worry and tears? This decision is not only about the responsibility of a police officer to his country, it also touches the deepest part of his heart as a father and a man who longs to protect his fragile home. So, what will Officer Hoai do in this heartbreaking situation? Can he fulfill his duty while still holding on to the love for his little family back home? Or will this moment become a turning point that changes their relationship forever? Stay tuned for today's episode to find out. Today was the last day Hoai could stay by the side of Hoai and little Tony. After this day, he would have to return to his unit, continuing the familiar yet heavy days of separation. That afternoon, the small house was filled with both warmth and a weighty silence. The 3 of them sat together as Hoai carefully reminded Hoai of everything, from taking care of her own health, to looking after Tony, even down to the smallest chores in the house. He tried to hide his sadness so she wouldn't worry, but his eyes still betrayed the reluctance to leave. Hoai listened quietly, nodding as she fought back tears. She knew that by tomorrow morning, Hoai would once again shoulder his backpack and leave. By the following afternoon, he had to report to his unit, and that very night, he would already be on night duty. While the adults were talking, Tony was innocently playing in the yard with the family's pets. His cheerful laughter eased the heaviness pressing down on his parents' hearts. But in just a careless moment, disaster struck. While playing, Tony stumbled and fell hard onto the ground. The dry thud echoed, making both Hoai and Hoai turn around in shock. The sight froze Hoai's heart. Tony lay sprawled on the ground, blood streaming from his head. She rushed to him in panic, clutching her trembling son in her arms. Tony screamed in pain, his tiny face scrunched up, blood from his forehead soaking his mother's hands. "Oh my God, Tony! Please don't scare Mommy!" Hoai choked out, tears streaming uncontrollably. Hoai stood stunned for a split second, then forced himself into composure. He quickly tore a piece of clean cloth and pressed it firmly against the wound to stop the bleeding. But blood seeped through, dripping red and heavy, making his heart tighten with each drop. Cold sweat broke out on his forehead, yet his eyes burned with determination. He would not allow panic to take over. "Hoai, get the keys. I'll take him to the hospital right now." Hoai shouted as he scooped Tony up into his arms, rushing out the door like a storm. Hoai stumbled after them, crying and praying, "Please, heaven and earth, protect my child, don't let anything happen to him." Tony's cries, the pounding hearts of his parents, and the descending dusk all blended together into a scene so tense it was almost suffocating. Hoai trembled as she held Tony tightly in her arms, trying to soothe her son with gentle whispers. "Tony, please, don't cry, sweetheart. Mommy's here. Daddy and Mommy are right here, you'll be okay." But her voice broke, tears streaming down her cheeks. Though her lips kept comforting him, her heart felt as if it were being crushed, the fear growing heavier with each passing moment. Beside her, Hung refused to allow himself any weakness. He gripped the steering wheel tightly, hurriedly gathering what was needed while carrying Tony straight to the car. His mind was in turmoil, but his reason forced him to stay calmer than ever. "We must reach the hospital. I have to save my son, no matter what, I cannot let anything happen to him," he told himself, as if commanding his own soul. The car sped violently along the rough road. Inside, Hoai clutched her son and sobbed uncontrollably. Blood from Tony's wound kept seeping through, soaking the already crimson cloth. Then suddenly, Tony's weak cries went silent. The small boy shivered, then collapsed limply in his mother's arms. "Tony! Please, wake up! Don't scare Mommy!" Hoai screamed, frantically shaking him gently. Hung heard her cries and felt his heart stop, but he forced himself to hold the wheel firmly. Panic was not an option. His voice trembled, yet remained resolute. "Hoai, hold him steady, don't shake him. Let me focus on driving. Trust me, our son will be fine." Sweat poured down Hung's face, mixing with the burning tension in his eyes. He pressed harder on the accelerator, the car racing forward amid the urgent blare of horns around them. In that moment, Hung was not only a steadfast police officer, but also a father fighting against time itself to snatch his son back from the brink. The road to the hospital seemed endless. Hoai's sobs, Hung's pounding heartbeat, and Tony's pale face all merged into a picture of unbearable tension and sorrow. As soon as the car reached the hospital, Hung rushed Tony into the emergency ward in his arms. Nurses quickly rolled out a stretcher, and the doctors immediately received the boy, still unconscious, blood trickling from the wound on his head. "Family, please wait outside. We'll begin emergency treatment right away," the doctor's urgent voice rang out. Hoai's trembling hands let go of her son as tears poured down her face. The doors of the ER slammed shut before her eyes, and in that instant, it felt as though her soul had been torn away. Her legs buckled, nearly collapsing beneath her, but Hung wrapped his arms around her, holding her upright. In the cold, bright hospital corridor, Hoai sobbed, her hands shaking as she clasped them together in desperate prayer. "My child, my Tony, please, you must be safe. I cannot lose you." Hung gripped her shoulders tightly. Though his own heart was in turmoil, every passing second burning like fire, he forced himself to speak words of comfort. His face was tense, sweat beading on his forehead, but his voice tried to remain steady. "Hoai, stay calm. Tony will be fine. He's strong, he'll make it through. Trust me, trust the doctors." But those words could not soothe the unbearable ache in a mother's heart. Hoai bent under the weight of her tears, feeling as if the sky itself was collapsing and everything before her had gone dark. Helplessness only deepened her pain. She could do nothing but stand outside while her little boy fought for his life behind those closed doors. The hurried footsteps of doctors, the clatter of medical instruments, the hum of machines, all slipping through the cracks of the ER door, turned every minute of waiting into an eternity. And Hung, a man who had once faced countless dangers without fear, now felt more powerless than ever. He could only hold Hoai tightly, suppress the terror in his chest, and silently pray for his son's safety. After more than 2 tense hours had passed, the doors of the operating room finally creaked open. A doctor stepped out, his white coat dotted with sweat. Hoai nearly rushed forward, her trembling hands clutching at his sleeve, her voice choked with desperation. "Doctor, my son, how is Tony? Is he going to be okay?" The doctor looked at her with a serious yet gentle expression, then softly reassured her. "Please, calm down. For now, the boy is out of danger. However, he remains unconscious. He suffered a strong impact to the head, resulting in significant blood loss and a mild traumatic brain injury. We've treated the wound, given a transfusion, and are monitoring him closely. But we will need time to see how he progresses." Hearing this, Hoai burst into tears, her legs giving way as if all strength had drained from her body. Hung quickly caught her, holding her trembling shoulders tight. He bent his head close, his voice warm but trembling with emotion. "Don't worry. Tony will pull through. Our son is strong." The doctor nodded slightly and added, "What matters most now is that you both stay strong, to be his support. Children are very sensitive. The presence and love of parents can help him recover faster. Also, the family needs to complete the hospital fee procedures so we can continue further tests and specialized care." At once, Hung straightened up, his eyes full of determination. He refused to let Hoai bear any more burden and hurried to the admissions desk. Inside him, a storm raged, worry for his son and the knowledge that tomorrow he was supposed to return to duty. But right now, only one thing mattered: saving his child at all costs. Hoai sat quietly in the hallway, her hands clasped tightly, her gaze fixed on the room where Tony lay. She was still crying, yet in her heart, a fragile spark of hope began to glow, the hope that her little boy would soon open his eyes and call out, "Mommy," to ease the pain tearing at her heart. Hearing the doctor's words, Hoai's legs gave out, her whole body trembling as if drained of all strength. She collapsed onto a chair, her face blank, her tear-filled eyes blurred with despair. To the mother, it felt as though the entire world had crumbled before her. Hung quickly bent down to support her, his voice filled with worry yet striving to stay calm. "Sit here and rest for a moment. Don't worry, Tony will be fine. I'll go pay the hospital fees, then we can see him." With that, he turned to leave, but his heart churned with unease. At the cashier's desk, the nurse handed him a provisional bill for the treatment. Hung froze as he read the amount, his hand trembling as he gripped the paper tightly. It was a sum far greater than the cash he had on hand, far more than what he even had in his bank account at the moment. A crushing sense of helplessness pressed against his chest. He bit his lip, his heart aching, not only from fear for his son's life but also from the uncertainty of how to come up with the money. Yet as a father, he knew he could not let his child's survival be delayed because of money. Without hesitation, Hung pulled out his phone and began calling those closest to him. His voice was urgent, desperate, edged with panic. "Brother, please help me, my son is in the ER, and the hospital fee is too high. I don't have enough money right now. Could you lend me some urgently? I promise I'll pay it back soon." After several calls, he finally reached a trusted colleague at his unit. Upon hearing the situation, the man didn't ask many questions. He simply said, "Tony is your son, and that makes him our son too. Take care of him, I'll transfer the money right away." Moments later, Hung's phone chimed with a bank notification. His eyes turned red as he exhaled deeply, as though a 1,000-pound stone had just been lifted from his chest. Immediately, he returned to the cashier to pay the full amount, ensuring Tony could continue to receive the best possible care. In that moment, Hung realized more clearly than ever, though life was filled with hardships, the bonds of brotherhood and human kindness would always be the pillars that carried him through adversity. The sudden crisis left Hung completely cornered. On one side was Tony, lying in the recovery ward with a serious injury. On the other was Hoai, nearly collapsing under the weight of worry for her son. Seeing the despair in her eyes only tightened the pain in Hung's heart. His finances had never been abundant, and now he carried not only the heavy hospital fees but also the debt borrowed from his colleagues. Those numbers weighed on him like a crushing burden, suffocating him. Hung was a man used to facing danger in the field, confronting criminals and tense situations. Yet here, in the face of illness and his family's suffering, he felt more powerless than ever. In a moment of silence, Hung sat motionless in the hospital corridor, his eyes fixed on the closed door of the ward. The steady beeping of the monitor drifting through the cracks only deepened his anxiety. Countless questions tore through his mind. Tomorrow, I must return to my unit. But with Tony like this, how can I leave my child behind? Hoai is too fragile. Can she endure it if I'm gone? What about my duty, my responsibility? If I request more leave, will my superiors allow it? And if they don't, then what am I supposed to do? Hung's heart ached as if torn in two. On one side were his career, his responsibilities, and the oath of honor he had sworn as a police officer. On the other was his small family, the woman he loved and the son lying unconscious on a hospital bed. He felt utterly torn, powerless, and trapped. Beside him, Hoai sat with her head bowed, eyes swollen red, her hands clasped together in constant prayer. Looking at her, Hung's sorrow deepened. He longed to hold her, to tell her he would stay. But in his heart, the weight was unbearable, for by tomorrow, his leave would end. 2 hours after the tense surgery, Tony was finally wheeled into the recovery room. On the crisp white hospital bed, the boy lay still, his pale face now carrying a faint blush of color. His breathing was steadier, no longer frantic as before. His forehead and head were wrapped in neat white bandages, each layer orderly, yet painful to look at, knowing the wound hidden beneath. Beside the bed, the monitor beeped steadily, each beep like a fragile rhythm holding on to life. Seeing her son in this state, Hoai's heart ached deeply, but at the same time, she felt a small sense of relief. At least he had made it past the brink of death. Hung stood nearby, his gaze softening. He gently placed a hand on his wife's shoulder, his voice warm but still carrying worry. Go out and eat something, regain your strength, then come back to watch over him. You've been crying and worrying all day. If you collapse, who will take care of Tony? Hoai shook her head, her voice quiet but firm. No. I can't leave. I just want to stay here. Only when I'm beside him can I feel at ease. Even if I collapse, I won't step away from him. Her red eyes, filled with unwavering determination, left Hung speechless. He understood the sacredness of a mother's love, knew that she could never rest without seeing her son before her eyes. He sighed, sat down beside her, silently becoming her support, a solid wall against the storm of emotions raging in the woman he loved. Time crawled by slowly, each second dragging on like an eternity. Then, at last, the anesthesia began to fade. Tony stirred faintly, his tiny hands trembling, his eyelids fluttering before slowly opening. The boy blinked at the blinding white light of the room, his eyes wet with pain, before suddenly bursting into sobs. Tony. My son, you're awake. Can you hear me? Mommy's here. Mommy is right here with you, Hoai cried, a mix of relief and heartbreak, as she threw her arms around him. Her voice trembled with love, as though she could pour strength into him with every word. She held Tony tightly, whispering through tears. It's over now, my brave boy, you're so strong. Mommy will never leave you. I'll always be right here, no matter what happens. As if sensing the warmth of her words and embrace, Tony's sobs softened. The little hiccups faded, and his tiny hand clung to his mother's shirt, as though afraid to let go. Nestled in her arms, he buried his face against her chest, took a deep breath, and slowly closed his eyes, finding comfort enough to sleep again. Hoai was still crying, but now they were tears of relief and happiness. Hung stood by, watching the scene, his heart overwhelmed. In that moment, all the fatigue, the worry over his work, and the weight of financial struggles faded into the background. Before him, only this little family remained, a resilient woman and a fragile child. He saw clearly now, this was the most precious thing he had to protect for the rest of his life. Hung leaned down, gently placing his hand over Tony's small one, whispering like a solemn vow. "My son. Daddy is here. I won't let you or your mother suffer anymore. No matter how hard things get, I'll overcome it, as long as we're together." In the cold, bright recovery room, the heavy air after the ordeal slowly lifted, leaving behind a fragile peace, yet one overflowing with love. That night, under the dim yellow lights of the hospital corridor, the atmosphere grew even more tense and still. The door to the room creaked open as a doctor and a nurse stepped inside to check on Tony. Hoai and Hung immediately stood up, their eyes following the doctor's every move. The doctor gently examined the wound on Tony's head, glanced at the monitor readings, and then nodded to the nurse. After a few minutes, he turned to Hoai and Hung, his voice calm yet firm. At present, the boy's condition is much more stable compared to when he was first admitted. However, he will still need to stay in the hospital for further observation. Though the brain injury is mild, we cannot be careless as there remains a risk of complications. The family should be prepared for a longer period of care. Hearing this, Hoai clasped her hands tightly, her heart holding its breath before she softly nodded. Her voice trembled but was filled with gratitude. "Thank you, doctor. Truly, thank you all for saving my son." The doctor gave a small smile and replied, "This is our responsibility. But the most important part is the family's companionship. The child will need to take his medication regularly and receive injections according to the treatment plan. I hope the two of you will work closely with the nurses so the recovery goes as smoothly as possible." Hung stepped forward and bowed his head slightly in thanks. "We will follow all instructions. Thank you for your dedication, doctor." After the doctor left, the room fell silent once again. Tony still lay peacefully on the bed, his breathing steady. Looking at her son, Hoai gently brushed aside the strands of hair falling over his bandaged forehead. Her eyes glistened with tears, but the panic within them had eased, replaced by a faint glimmer of hope. She whispered softly, almost like a vow to herself. "You'll be fine, as long as Mommy is here, you won't have to be afraid of anything." Beside her, Hung quietly sat down on the chair, his gaze fixed on the white bandages wrapped around his son's head. His heart was still heavy, but at least for now, he could breathe easier knowing his child was safe. After a long and exhausting day, Tony's condition had gradually stabilized. Though still weak, hooked to 4 fluids and medication, his little face had regained a hint of color. Seeing her son breathing evenly, no longer convulsing or crying in pain, Hoai finally felt some relief, her eyes less red and swollen. Hung had slipped out to buy some hot porridge and light food. Placing the container in front of Hoai, he spoke gently. "Eat something, you need your strength to care for him. I bought a portion for Tony too. Once the doctor allows, we can feed him." Hoai lifted her gaze toward him, her eyes filled with gratitude but also exhaustion. She nodded softly, though she still remained by Tony's bedside, unwilling to look away even for a moment. Hung sat down, watching mother and child. Inside, a fierce struggle rose in his heart. He knew he was supposed to return to his unit tomorrow, with duties awaiting him. Yet looking at Tony lying frail on the hospital bed, and Hoai so thin and weary she could barely eat, his heart clenched. He couldn't bear it, not now, not when they needed him most. Finally, Hung picked up his phone and sat in a corner of the corridor, dialing his superior's number. When the line connected, he drew a deep breath, his voice hoarse but resolute. "Reporting, sir, my son is still in the hospital. His condition is weak, and the doctor says he needs close monitoring. I request permission for 1 or 2 more days of leave to care for him." On the other end, after a pause, his superior's warm but firm voice replied, "I understand your situation. Family is important. I'll grant you 2 more days to be with your wife and child. But, Hung, you must understand, you've already exceeded the standard leave. You've only just been reassigned, and your colleagues are carrying extra work in your absence. I expect you to settle things soon and return to focus fully on your duties." Hung was silent for a long moment. His heart was both relieved, grateful for the extra time, and heavy with the weight of responsibility awaiting him. At last he answered simply, his voice carrying both gratitude and resolve. "Understood. Thank you, sir, for your consideration. I'll arrange everything properly and return to duty on time." Ending the call, Hung gripped the phone tightly, his eyes fixed on the hospital room where his wife and son waited. Slowly, he walked back, sat beside Hoai, and gently squeezed her hand. In a quiet voice, he made a promise. "I'll stay with you and our son for 2 more days. We'll get through this together, and then I'll return to my duty." Under the dim yellow lights of the hospital, Hoai rested her head on Hung's shoulder. Tears rolled down once again, but this time, they were no longer tears of despair. They were tears of comfort, of gratitude, and of silent love. That night, as the hospital sank into silence, Hung sat motionless in the endless corridor, his vacant eyes staring out into the empty courtyard. Inside the room, Hoai had fallen asleep with her head resting by her son's bedside, her hand tightly clasping Tony's tiny one. The sight pierced Hung's heart even deeper. He was consumed by hesitation and inner turmoil. His duty at the unit still awaited him. In just 2 days, no matter what, he had to return. It was his responsibility, the calling of a police officer. But Tony remained so fragile, his recovery uncertain. The thought of leaving Hoai alone to shoulder everything in such a difficult time made Hung's chest tighten with anguish. How can I leave with peace of mind? What if Tony's condition worsens? What if Hoai collapses? Countless questions tore through his mind, leaving him more conflicted than ever. Hung buried his face in his hands, sighing heavily. He had endured countless trials, faced danger and criminals head-on, but never had he felt so powerless. This was not a battle against an enemy, but a battle against his own heart and sense of duty. At last, after a long silence, he lifted his head. His eyes were tired, yet filled with resolve. He knew he had little choice left. He decided to spend his remaining 2 days of leave entirely with Hoai and Tony, caring for them, giving them strength. After that, no matter how painful it would be, he would return to his post and continue the path he had chosen. Hung whispered inwardly, as if making a vow to himself. "I'll stay with you and our son for these 2 days. Then, no matter how much it hurts, I'll have to leave. But I believe, as long as this love remains, we'll overcome everything." He rose to his feet and quietly entered the room. There, Hoai still sat slumped, her head bowed beside Tony's bed. Gently, Hung draped a thin blanket over her shoulders, then sat down next to her. Though his heart still carried countless worries, in that moment, he chose silence, simply staying by her side, a steady pillar for his wife and son in the midst of this harsh storm. So then, can Tony fully recover his health? The wound on his head, though treated in time by the doctors, still carries hidden risks. In the coming days, will Tony slowly regain his strength and smile with the same innocence as before? Or will he still have to fight through pain and unexpected complications? And what about Hoai? After days of tension and suffering, how will she choose? Can she endure, becoming both a source of strength for her son and a support for Hung as he struggles between duty and love? Or will the burden of fear and exhaustion, both physical and emotional, finally bring her down? Most of all, what decision will Hung, the man of the family, yet also a police officer, make? Before him lies a sacred duty to his country, one he cannot neglect, and yet also his small family who need him now more than ever. Will he bring himself to leave Hoai and Tony in their hardest days to return to duty? Or will he defy the rules and choose to stay, even if it threatens his career, even his future? Work, responsibility, love, family, four separate threads now woven tightly together, binding Hung's heart in an inescapable storm. And with just one choice, everything could change, his own fate, his family's safety, and even his comrades' trust. Which path will Hung take? Can Hoai stand firm with him through this trial? And will Tony recover, to once again smile in the embrace of his parents? All will be revealed in the next episode. Stay tuned to find out what happens to our three characters.
Xin chào tất cả mọi người đã quay trở lại với kênh của mình. Hôm nay thì mình tiếp tục đưa đến với mọi người câu chuyện về mẹ đơn thân Lý Hoài Ca và cảnh sát Hùng. Mọi người thân mến, thì như ở trong tập trước mọi người cũng đã biết thì hiện tại Hùng đang rơi vào một hoàn cảnh rất là khó khăn khi anh vừa về thăm Hoài Ca và Tony sau khi lập công và được nghỉ phép. Và mọi người vừa mới ở bên nhau những giây phút rất hạnh phúc khi tổ chức sinh nhật cho Hoài Ca xong. Thì trong lúc vui đùa thì Tony, con trai của Hoài Ca, đã vô tình bị ngã và đập đầu xuống. Thì việc này dẫn tới là Tony đang bị chấn thương nặng ở vùng đầu. Bây giờ thì Tony đang ở trong bệnh viện và chi phí viện phí cũng rất là cao. Và hiện tại thì tình hình kinh tế của Hùng cũng khá là khó khăn. Thêm vào đó là công việc của anh thì đang yêu cầu phải quay lại cơ quan. Vậy thì Hùng liệu sẽ quyết định như thế nào? Làm sao để có thể bảo vệ Hoài Ca và Tony, và điều gì đang chờ đợi họ tiếp theo? Hãy cùng đón xem vào tập sau để biết thêm chi tiết nhé mọi người.